I thought there was something pretty big on its way on Thursday, and I had the sort of newsroom on standby for something significant. I have to say to you, though, I didn't think that the prince title would just because you're born with it. I just
Yeah.
didn't think that was possible. I thought they might maybe change the law, or the
Yeah.
government would agree to find some parliamentary time to do that. As for the prince thing, no, I thought he would keep that, but just lose everything else. But no prince, no dukedom, no knighthood. It's all pretty devastating for him.
And look, we've obviously been covering this story extensively here on Times Radio, as other outlets have had. And we've had some of our listeners say, look, we're a bit sick of all of this coverage. And let's kick off with story news about the royal family, of course. Still a huge story dominating most of the front pages today. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, obviously formerly known as Prince Andrew, is facing renewed calls from the US Congress to give evidence about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, the paedophile. Newly released court documents have released that he told Jeffrey Epstein that it would be good to catch up in person after his release from prison. Democratic members of the House Oversight Committee are demanding that Andrew testify. They've indicated that they're willing to formally issue him with a witness summons. Well, let's now catch up with Chris Shipp. Chris is the ITV News royal editor. Chris, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good afternoon. How are you?
So, gosh, what a week it's been for you, Chris.
Again, actually, didn't we speak a couple of Saturdays ago when we had what was I think I counted as the third attempt to sort the Andrew problem out, and it took another one to finally get to where we are now.
And look, you're a very distinguished royal editor. You're very close to the palace and everything that goes around. Did you think this would happen, that the actual title of prince would get taken away?
I thought there was something pretty big on its way on Thursday, and I had the sort of newsroom on standby for something significant. I have to say to you, though, I didn't think that the prince title would just because you're born with it. I just didn't think that was possible. I thought they might maybe change the law, or the government would agree to find some parliamentary time to do that. As for the prince thing, no, I thought he would keep that, but just lose everything else. But no prince, no dukedom, no knighthood. It's all pretty devastating for him.
And look, we've obviously been covering this story extensively here on Times Radio, as other outlets have had. And we've had some of our listeners say, look, we're a bit sick of all of this coverage. Is this really this big a story? You're a royal editor. How big is this story?
I think we got to a point, particularly in the last week, when it was looking a little bit. I choose this word. It's a very light word, problematic, shall we say, for the monarchy. And I think we got to a point where it was getting a little bit destabilising. Everything that King did was seen through the prism of his younger brother. He just about, to be fair, just about got away with going to the Vatican to pray alongside the Pope and mark that significant moment, which we should all remember was the first time in 500 years a British monarch had prayed alongside the leader of the Roman Catholic Church. And he only just got away with it because Andrew the Andrew story sandwiched the King's trip to the Vatican. Prince William's got a significant visit next week to Brazil. He's going to the UN Climate Change Summit with Keir Starmer. He's also going to Earthshot. And the Andrew story just simply wasn't going away. It was getting worse and worse and worse, and they just had to do something. So this is the King saying, do you know what? I've looked under every stone. I've looked at every roll of peerages, whatever else I can do, and I'm closing this story down as best I can. Get out your house, lose your titles, lose your peerage, just stop being a story. And as tough as this might be for you, this is what needs to happen.
And do you think this does now close this story down, or do you think this story's still got legs on it, particularly now that we know that members of the Oversight Committee in America are saying that Andrew should testify?
The story's still got legs, and there's plenty of places it could go. What the King's tried to do this week is just put as much distance as he can between the institution of monarchy and what he and Queen Camilla and William and Kate are doing, and the story that is inevitably going to continue to unfold around Prince Andrew. You're right to say that in the US, there's still plenty of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein. And remember, he's the criminal here. He committed the crimes. He had victims and trafficked girls around the world. Prince Andrew has been accused of things. He's always denied all those allegations against him, and the Metropolitan Police have never brought any charges against him, despite looking into it. Where might it go next? Well, there's plenty of files in America that are still sealed and could be unsealed, and names may appear. Also, the Metropolitan Police have got a couple of little things they're looking into. One was that email from a couple of weeks ago about whether or not Andrew had asked his police protection officer to dig dirt on his accused of Virginia Giuffre. So there, the story still has legs. It could still go places, but this was about the monarchy saying, we don't want this to be tainting our institution anymore. We've had enough. This was the king, frankly, lancing the boil.
And do these Congress men and women in America, if they do call him formally, Andrew, formally to be a witness, is he compelled to go? Do they have any sort of legal powers, or is it still up to him if he does go and testify?
Kind of depends how they go about it. There's a Democrat on the House Oversight Committee who said to us yesterday, we are still urging Prince Andrew to come forward because we just want to question him because we know you were a friend. There's pictures of you two together. You've said as much. Even, some of the things he said in Newsnight were about his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, and those things haven't changed, unlike some of his other claims on that show. And, therefore, these politicians want Andrew just to come and speak to them. There's two ways they can do that. Either invite him and say, please fly over, we'd like to have a chat with you, or they're going to perhaps subpoena him. But I can't see a world in which Andy would agree to do either of those things, because as soon as he's sat down in a chair with all the cameras facing him and everything on him, that is going to make his life much more difficult than it already is.
And look, just in terms of the sort of wider effect on the royal family and the monarchy, it is interesting that we are in this situation now where we have kind of two generations of brothers who have massively sort of fallen out for very, very, very different reasons. You've now got kind of Charles and Andrew. Obviously, the sort of allegations against Andrew very, very serious, even though he denies things, but his association is seen as very unsavoury. Then the generation down, you've got, William and Harry, who are very much estranged. I mean, it's quite something, isn't it? These kind of fractures within the royal family.
It's not great. And, if I was running the Republic campaign group at the moment, which is the pressure group that wants the UK to have an elected head of state and not a monarchy, I'd be thinking this is kind of what the circumstances I'd most happily take. It's been very damaging. And you're right, there are lots of family dynamics, as there are in all families. And perhaps it just goes to show yet again the problem with having heirs and spares, just to use the title of Harry's book. And, this isn't new. Look at what happened with Princess Margaret when she was the spare to Princess and then Queen Elizabeth. And none of this is really new. It is just part of the problem of the institution of handing things down to the oldest born child, at least now. It used to be boy, but now it's oldest child. So the royal family has been rocked by this, but what the king tried to do, and also remember Queen Camilla's had a lot of say in this because of all the excellent work, I think, as you know yourself, Aisha, that she does for the victims of domestic abuse and the victims of violence against women and girls. They could just see how much damage this whole thing was doing. And interestingly, that statement they put out on Thursday evening said very clearly their majesties, so both the king and queen, wanted to say that their thoughts and sympathies are with and will always be with the victims of all forms of abuse. And that was something that was very much missing from Prince Andrew. I shouldn't call him Prince Andrew anymore, but it's very difficult. That's something that was missing from Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's statement a couple of weeks ago.
And what of Sarah Ferguson? Where does all of this leave her?
Out in the cold is the answer. She's currently living in Royal Lodge. You've probably seen the pictures on our news and other people's news bulletins of a big fancy house in the middle of Windsor Park. She's been living there for a long time with her ex-husband, and they've spoken about being the best of friends after their divorce. However, there is no room or there's no accommodation being made available for Sarah Ferguson on the Sandringham estate, which is where Andrew is going, and she's on her own. Her office, or those who speak on her behalf, have told me that she's going to, make her way separately now.
So that means
Sarah
she
Ferguson
is going to sort of not be sort of side by side Andrew as she has been for all these years.
Yes, I think she still will support him, but she's obviously been supporting him, during a very difficult time for him. Let's be clear, ever since Newsnight and even before that, they've been very difficult years for Prince Andrew, and Sarah Ferguson has stayed by his side throughout. But effectively, I mean, and Buckingham Palace said this in very sort of black and white terms the other day. Well, we aren't making any provision for Sarah Ferguson, so she has to make her own way,
And
which is
she, of
interesting.
course, yeah, I mean, she's somebody who's also been dogged with various scandals and many of them involving money. And of course, she had a very, she was very good friends with Jeffrey Epstein as well. I think he lent her money at some point, and she was very much in contact with him, apologising for speaking out against him. Do you think this has really tarnished her as well in the same way as Andrew?
Absolutely, she's always, I think you could say, been the acceptable face of the York family, standing by her ex-husband doggedly, and yet, since those emails which revealed that she effectively apologized to Jeffrey Epstein for having to publicly denounce him, I mean, it's very difficult to recover from that, and she hasn't. The key thing, Aisha, about Sandringham, which is where Andrew will be living, is it's a private estate. So, like Balmoral is also private. For example, Prince Albert bought that estate for Queen Victoria. So these are things that have been handed down through the generations and nothing to do with the taxpayer. By putting Andrew in Sandringham, no one can say, well, how much rent's he paying, or should the Crown Estate get more money, because Crown Estate money eventually, when they make a profit, ends up in the Treasury. So the key thing here was the King putting as much distance as he could between the monarchy and the publicly funded part of the monarchy, and then his brother, who he is now paying for from his own private funds.
And what do you think will happen to Andrew? Do you think he will just live out a quiet life, playing video games or whatever in Sandringham, or could you see him? We had Andrew Lowney on last week saying maybe he might go to a Gulf state. Maybe he might go and rebuild himself in the Middle East or something.
There are places in the world where I think he would be accepted. From the time when he was a trade ambassador for the UK, he made lots of connections around the world, in China, in the Gulf, as you rightly say. So it's entirely possible he could do that. But I mean, I think whatever he does now is going, because if he ends up in a Gulf state and, some rich sheikh is paying for him to be there, I'm not sure the papers are necessarily going to look on that very kindly.
Gosh, it's gone from prince to pariah, hasn't he now? That's the sort of reality of it. Well, look, Chris, always good to catch up with you. You've had such a busy week. Thank you so much for your time.